$250 million, a tarp hanging over the front of a national landmark, and a board that just voted to do the exact thing a federal judge told it to stop doing. Tonight, the Kennedy Center votes a second time to shut its main building for 2 years and to put President Trump's name back on the entrance. A judge throws out the federal government's antisemitism lawsuit against Harvard. Tyson Foods moves to exit more beef plants while cattle run short, and that one lands on your grocery bill. We also have an aircraft carrier being pulled out of the Middle East over the conditions crews are living in, a Texas court order wiping out federal rules on silencers, and a very quiet ending to a federal investigation into Nike. 6 stories, 6 documents, no spin. Stay to the end, because the last one tells you exactly how corporate diversity policy is really being decided right now. That building has had a tarp across its face for months, ever since a federal judge ruled that President Donald Trump's name was unlawfully added to it. On Thursday, the Kennedy Center's board voted a second time to shut down most of the Washington Arts Complex for what is described as a 2-year renovation, according to a person briefed on the vote who spoke to NPR anonymously, because they were not authorized to speak publicly. The plan runs $250 million, structural repairs, new marble floors, nearly $12 million in acoustical improvements, and a temporary move for the famous 8-foot bronze bust of John F. Kennedy in the main foyer. The Reach, a 2019 edition, stays open for limited programming. The main campus would reopen in the summer of 2028. The board also voted to put Trump's name back on the entry, calling the complex, quote, restored and renovated by President Donald J. Trump. Here is the context. The board approved a full shutdown in March. In May, Judge Christopher Cooper temporarily blocked it, writing that none of the board members had sufficient information to make a well-considered decision. Trump chairs the center, and most of the board are his appointees. Representative Joyce Beatty sued in December to reverse the name change. Thursday's meeting was held on Zoom, was not public, and every decision still needs that judge's approval. Reported by NPR. The judge has just thrown out the federal government's anti-Semitism lawsuit against Harvard University. That is the headline from AP News, and it is worth sitting with because this case was one of the most visible fights between President Donald Trump's administration and American higher education. The administration alleged anti-Semitism at Harvard. A judge has now dismissed that lawsuit. The report we have does not lay out the judge's reasoning, and it does not say whether the government intends to appeal. So treat both of those as open questions rather than answers. What can be said is this: a dismissal ends a case. It is not a verdict on the underlying allegations, and it does not by itself stop the government from pursuing other routes. And the reason a courtroom fight like this belongs on a money channel is simple. Leverage over a university almost always runs through dollars: research grants, federal contracts, student aid, tax treatment. When a lawsuit is the instrument, losing the lawsuit removes that instrument. For students, for faculty, and for the tens of thousands of people employed across a research university's economy, the practical question is whether the funding pressure eases or simply moves to a different mechanism. Watch for 2 things next: a notice of appeal and any administrative action that shows up to replace what the courtroom just took away. Reported by AP News. If you have looked at beef prices lately, this is the story sitting underneath them. The Wall Street Journal reports exclusively that Tyson Foods is set to exit more beef plants with cattle in short supply. 2 facts in one sentence, and they feed each other. Start with the cattle. Beef is the slowest supply chain in the grocery store. A rancher's decision to hold back or sell an animal today shows up at the meat counter years later, not weeks later. When the national herd is tight, packers bid against each other for a shrinking pool of cattle, and the margin inside every plant gets squeezed. Now the plants. A beef plant is a huge fixed cost that only works when the line runs full. If Tyson cannot fill that line, exiting sites is the rational move for the company, and a brutal one for the town, because a packing plant is often the biggest employer for miles, and local cattle prices depend on having a buyer nearby. For you, fewer plants means less processing capacity in the system, and less slack when anything else goes wrong. The Journal's report does not put a number on how many plants or how many jobs. Those specifics are what to watch for, alongside the price of ground beef, reported by the Wall Street Journal. Here is one that got almost no airtime today. NBC News reports that the USS Abraham Lincoln is to be replaced amid poor conditions for troops deployed to the Middle East. Carriers rotate constantly, and that part is routine. The reason given here is not. When the stated problem is the conditions the crew is living in, that is a readiness story and a maintenance story at the same time. An aircraft carrier is a small floating city, thousands of sailors, months away from home, eating, sleeping, and working inside the same steel box. Conditions on board are one of the things that decide whether trained people re-enlist, and every experienced sailor who walks away is a training bill the taxpayer pays twice. There is a direct money angle, too. Swapping one carrier for another mid-deployment is not free. It means fuel, escorts, an accelerated departure for another crew and their families, and repair work on the ship coming off station, all of it inside a defense budget you fund. The report we have does not detail what specifically was wrong on board, what any repairs will cost, or which ship takes over. Those are the three things to press for. Watch for a Navy statement, and for members of Congress asking what crews were living with, and for how long. Reported by NBC News. One court order in one state has just knocked out federal firearms rules. The Associated Press reports that a Texas court order has kicked in, striking federal rules on silencers and certain guns. Focus on that phrase for a second. Kicks in. This is not a proposal, a comment period, or a pending appeal sitting on a shelf. It is operative now. Here is the context that makes it matter beyond the headline. Federal firearms regulation is not only a safety system, it is a financial and paperwork system, registration, transfer taxes, licensed dealers, and records that manufacturers and retailers build their entire compliance operations around. Strike a rule and every one of those businesses has to work out immediately what is legal to sell tomorrow. Buyers are in exactly the same position. Then there is the geography question. A single court order can reach nationwide or it can be limited in scope, and the report we have does not resolve which this one is. That distinction decides whether this is a Texas story or an American story, and it is the first thing to look for in the coming days. Expect appeals, expect guidance from the agencies involved, and expect other courts to be asked the very same question, quickly. Reported by the Associated Press. Last one, and it is the quietest, which is exactly why it matters. The Hill reports that a federal judge in Missouri agreed on Thursday to dismiss a subpoena enforcement action against Nike after the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission said the company had complied with its investigation into diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. Judge Christian Stevens granted the agency's request to end the action. Let me translate that. A subpoena enforcement action is what a federal agency files in court when it wants documents and believes it is not getting them. The agency itself asked the judge to close it because in its telling, Nike handed the material over. So the case ends with no verdict, no fine, and no ruling that the company did anything wrong. It simply ends. And that is the shape of this entire enforcement wave. The pressure on corporate diversity programs is not arriving mainly as dramatic lawsuits. It is arriving as document demands, and it resolves in quiet cooperation off camera. If you work for a large employer, this is the machinery that decides whether your company keeps its mentorship program, its hiring targets, or its employee resource groups, usually long before anything reaches a courtroom. What to watch is whether the underlying investigation produces findings, and which company receives the next subpoena. Reported by The Hill. Watch the Kennedy Center docket next, because every single vote taken on Thursday still needs a federal judge's sign-off, and that judge has already blocked this board once. So tell me below, which of these 6 actually hits your wallet first, the beef plants or the courtrooms? If this was worth your 9 minutes, hit like and subscribe.